Okay. So I'm today in Reality Talks with our Arevalo. We just met by accident in one accountancy with JT Fox. It is a business community there, but I liked what Arevalo presented there about consciousness. And since I'm interested in reality, in consciousness, and all these different things, and in this series where I'm every Friday, we can speak freely on different topics. So I would like, Arevalo, what is on your mind and what you would like to say to my people in the Facebook and my community that I'm acquainted with about consciousness and how you actually see it from your perspective.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me, first of all. I really enjoyed meeting you online on LinkedIn. One of the things I actually found interesting is that a lot of us are now focused on the collective consciousness, this idea where we as a species are stopping the focus of I-centered reality and starting to work on the community aspect of it. And so a lot of the work that I do writes to that particular audience, to the intelligentsia of our population that speaks to trying to be more harmonious with the balance of higher consciousness as opposed to egocentric consciousness. So a lot of what you've read and from my work is dealing with the merging of faith and science, where consciousness is evolving into something of a grander vision. And a lot of the work that I do specifically deals with bringing those two worlds together in a way that balances it equally.
And can you give some examples in what exactly you are doing in the reality, so to say? Because I have heard a lot of people, a lot of theories, but I'm interested how actually consciousness and this higher way of thinking can be brought into a real everyday world. And what do you have projects that you have started, or how are you doing these explorations?
Well, a lot of what I believe is actually based on resonance. So we as a species, when we resonate at a higher frequency, we seem to connect higher to our higher self. And that really allows physical manifestation to come into our world because it's like a fine-tuned instrument that is hearing very clearly. And so things start to move in the direction that you need it to go in. It's with intention, right? So when resonance, opportunity then creates the outcome that you seek. And a lot of us are finding that sometimes what it is that we're putting into the universe is not very clear, and it's a little muddled. And so the higher your resonance and the clearer you are with the way that you live your life, the easier it is to manifest your dreams or manifest what it is that you want to happen in your life.
Yes, I still have some thought process going on regarding this and how actually this vibrational realm is working with us. And basically, when I'm speaking in my thought process about reality, for me, it is important on a daily basis. When, for example, I wake up in the morning, I have a specific time zones that I have prepared in the morning where I'm more calm, and then I feel more connected, and I use this time to download and to think about things and to be more into my inner self and to prepare myself for the day. But is it possible to stay in high vibration all the time, or it depends from the moments and how you are doing it in your life, I mean, practically?
Well, one of the things I've noticed with us in particular is that a lot of times our day will fluctuate depending on what we're exposed to. And a lot of spiritual teachers, including myself, would tell you that the more centered you are in your day-to-day and the more less reactive you are, the more harmonious your day goes, right? So you stay at a higher frequency on a regular basis. And what's usually best is a lot of meditative time, even if it's just short breaks within your day, that really allows you to kind of focus your energy back onto what's really important for you and knowing where your boundaries are. Because a lot of us go into this push and pull with people and with situations about what our personal boundaries are in life. And so the more that we react to it, the more those things seem to happen. So we seem to fall off the rock, if you will. They call it founded on the rock. It's an esoteric theosophy, but what I'm saying though is that a lot of us go through that period. So at some point, like you're doing, you start to actually become more self-aware, and that self-awareness actually leads you to a higher quality of experience in your own reality, because you don't react as much to other people. For example, like, we work in the public eye and we do things where we put things out into the media and it kind of lives forever. And someone can make a comment or say something that's from their perspective. And if we're not centered enough, it affects our reality and the way we then operate for the rest of the day. But the truth is, every one of us is either in front or behind us in evolution. And anyone who's saying something negative might be having a crappy day. You can't take that personally. But we internalize these things and we create that into our environment until we overcome it, is my theory. And so when we come into challenging situations, the more reactionary we are to that situation, the more that pattern begins to emerge over and over again until you finally squash it, right? But with you, you're very centered in yourself and you're all about higher conscious living. And that creates a more harmonious experience for you. But for the audience watching this, they may not be at that point yet. So the thing to remember is you really have to understand what your core values are and where your spiritual center is. Do you meditate a lot? Do you allow things to just go over you? Like, do you not absorb all the negativity that you experience throughout the day-to-day living? And if you do, then you're going to find what you're doing, which is a higher frequency of actually materializing great outcomes in your own life.
Yes, and for example, when you're moving during the day, how are you actually managing the feeds, and do you feel that you have ability to actually influence your reality in a way that everything that is happening to you during the day in your data stream is actually 100% or custom made for you? Do you feel it like this, or do you feel it like it's constant interaction between your reality and other realities?
Well, we have to understand that everybody's reality is a universal reality, right? Whether you believe in a higher power, whether you believe in God, Allah, whoever it is, we exist within that conscious mind. And so all of our experiences are technically one. That's why we speak to oneness. So when you experience other people tapping into your reality, you have to understand that from a higher perspective, it's not your reality, it's our reality from the beginning. So you remove the power that they possess and the ability to make your reality shift, because you realize that you're all just extensions of that grand design being. There's no one that has any better or higher or lower rate or power than the other person. So when we experience life, like let's say that you're working in an environment where you deal in a bar industry and you deal with a lot of drunk people, well, you're going to go into that knowing that you're going to have that happen. But there's always that one person who acts up and really throws something at you that will throw you off of what you're doing. And so then you have to realize that it's not their reality that's influencing, it's your own reality. You're responding within yourself to their stimuli. And so if you don't stay focused and you don't stay attentive to what it is that's happening, which is they're just mirroring you. You work in that environment. They're just mirroring something that you deal with daily. And they're challenging you to stay focused and to not let it affect you.
Yes, and in a sense, do you feel when you are moving through reality that you are also influencing others, and how your energy and how your field and how you're moving through the days also influencing the others, and in this interconnectedness, how do you feel it usually?
Well, what I've personally found from my own personal experience is the more peaceful and in my own headspace that I am, the more that it affects the external world. So let's say that I'm in a chaotic situation. I don't really like big crowds, but when I go into them, I'm one of those people that people gravitate towards. I have this natural gravitational pull because of the peacefulness and the stillness that exists within me. So as you walk in your day-to-day living, what I've experienced is people genuinely like being around me. Although it may only be for short periods of time, because I do kind of live in a purified state. I don't really, do anything that's outrageous. I don't, go out party. I don't drink. I don't have sex. I mean, I drink occasionally, but I don't have sex and all that other crazy stuff. So when I enter an environment, it's very kind of calm. And I think what it does is just relaxes everyone around you. And when you have that ability, people then want you around more and more often. And so I think that's what you're asking to that end.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And for example, when you put your intentions and when you decide what type of, because I found out till now two tendencies. Some people are willing to go through life without any goals, without anchoring something into reality, just to live, and whatever happens, everything is perfect, reality is great. So we even don't need to influence it, don't need to touch anything, we just need to move through it. without any possibility to destroy something. How are you doing it with yourself?
Repeat the last part. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that last part.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel that the work is so perfect so that you actually don't need to, you're consciously and with intent trying not to project yourself upon everything else, because everything else is just so perfect, and we don't need, with our level of consciousness, to actually influence other people? Because you see, some people are very strongly into influencing and projection, but also other people are very strongly in the opposite direction, just being alone and don't bother the others.
Well, some of it has to do with ego, right? Because a lot of people, when they carry their ego, whether good or bad, because there's good ego and there's negative ego, right? Negative ego is very lower vibrational, it's materialistic, it's driven by I want to have power. And what people fail to realize when they're pursuing power is something that's granted to you based on your ability to conquer whatever it is that you're doing. And so one of the things I've noticed with the ego situation is there's also positive ego, which is when you are just trying to be of service to the greater world. And when you're trying to do good, then that's positive ego that kind of extends itself. But when I specifically interact with specific people who have a little bit more of the domineering ego, where they're trying to project their perspective or whatever it is that their agenda is, you have to then take into account the fact that they are just an expression of the divine being looking back at you, and it's trying to actualize something that maybe you don't necessarily understand. And so there's a patience and a compassion that you have to possess in order to operate your reality, because you're understanding that something is trying to be said to you, and it is your job in that experience, in that interaction, to go, okay, what am I supposed to learn here? Because he's just pissing me off, or something to that degree. And then you have to pull yourself back together and say, okay, well, maybe he's not pissed. Okay, I get it. I'm reacting to him. So the lesson here is that I should never let someone else's ego cross my boundary. And so then we start navigating and doing that little dance that we do in reality, which is we start testing boundaries, right? We don't like when people sit right next to us. It has nothing to do with COVID for me personally. I just don't want people right on me, but it influences my day. And so you start to look at the smaller things because they actually matter to us. It's the little details really drive us crazy. There are several different personality types that Divine has in play, right? He has the type A personality that needs to always know where they're going, but doesn't enjoy the journey getting there because they just want to get there. And then you have the rest of us who are like what you're saying, which is we just kind of go through life floating, and we're like, whatever happens, I'm just going to let it happen. And you start to realize that the person that you kind of were looking down at, like, oh, they're so flighty. But then so many good things happen in their reality because they're living in a pure state where the ego has been nullified. And so they're understanding that resistance, when you put resistance to things that happen to you, it just builds more resistance. So then we just end up crazy and we're running around all, psychotic, and we're like, what is going on? Why are we so not able to control our own destiny? And the reality is you are, by the way that you are projecting into the world. And so it's one of those things where it's a perspective swing. I used to say to people, I go, if you ever want to truly understand yourself and where you're at, do us a favor. Look at the same situation that you're stressed out about from 12 different angles. And if you can't figure out what's going on, then there's deeper work to get done. But if you can look at something in your day-to-day life where you are taking control of something, and you can look at it from 12 different perspectives, then you will be able to then pick the right choice for you, and it'll be more streamlined, is what I'm saying. Yeah. That's my personal opinion on that one.
And for example, because I have created for myself, in order to understand better reality, and it really opened myself very much, because for me, it's important, the human being, not only to become aware, to become conscious, but also to stay and to be functional. Because I see a lot of dysfunctionality in a lot of people, and I'm just wondering why it's so. And for me personally, to be functional is also very important, and to be interactive and all these things. So I was wondering how, and because I have created, it's part of this integral theory about the quadrants in reality, where the quadrant number 1 is your individual internal thing that happens only inside of you that nobody can see. Then your body is the expression of everything that you are inside, and then this collective internal, where is some people say the quantum field, as you're saying, this the collective consciousness, the collective mind, the collective experience, and so on. And then the part of the reality that a lot of people even are trying to ignore, the so-called civilization and the actual external world as it is. We can like it or don't like it. It is out there and we are living in it daily. And do you have a specific way of interacting with these four parts of reality? I mean, your internal way of interacting with meditation and so on and connecting, it's, of course, you can share some hints, but also I'm interested especially in this external interaction where people are in business. For example, I have a business company, I have 30 people, now I'm still in the office. I have also work, so I cannot all the time stay only in my quadrant one and be only in meditation, because I need to be interactional, creating my high conscious company. I have a lot of also interest in this, how we can create a much more high conscious outer reality also.
Right. What I would say to that is a lot of people become, not a lot of people, but sometimes what can happen, even just spiritual people, is you start to disconnect from the reality like you're talking about. And you remove yourself from the situation because you're trying to stay at a high vibration, never evolving though. And what people don't realize is that if you can find your way to have a life of service, like your company is a service-oriented company, it deals with consciousness and evolution. And so there's an actual commodity there that's an exchange between your higher self and you as the personality that's now focusing it out. But for a lot of people, they lack that fire within their gut. And so they like disenfranchised from the environment and from the world, thinking that it's better for them to become a hermit, right? Where they are just going to work on themselves and they're not really going to interact with the outside world because it's all going to hell in a handbasket. But what they don't realize is it's that kind of attitude that is feeding the collective consciousness that is making you go to hell in a handbag. And so if you can find your way to a life of service and whatever it is, even if it's just a side hustle, people talk about side hustles all the time. If you find an exchange within your higher consciousness into the external world and your personality reality, then life becomes that much more whole, right? It becomes holy, not holy as in religious, but holy. And what it then does for your life is it allows you to reconnect to the people that you're now attracting, because it brings your attention to the fact that you are now energetically pulling in people that will either teach you or learn from you. And it creates something that you become more impassioned by. And suddenly life opens up again. But yes, I will say that a lot of highly spiritual people go through what I call the Hermit Phase, which is where they completely disconnect from the outside world. They stop looking at the news. And what that's doing, it's almost like not to judge anybody, but it's from my experience, it was a little bit of a cop-out on my part, because then I realized I was never exposing myself to the stimuli that would help me evolve as a being, as a soul. And so I started to refocus it from a higher perspective, and I started to look at the world from a global scale instead of from nation to nation or city to city or person to person. And I started to see where the boss was heading, right? Like where we see two polar opposites on a topic, and there's no middle ground, then the task is pretty clear. Find the middle ground and be that servant to that cause. But a lot of people get so disenfranchised with polarity that they forget that the universality of us is oneness. So our path, every way you look at it, is towards each other. So when you find like you have a life of service, that you create a business that influences like social norms, or does something good for humanity, or does something for the soul, or anything that perpetuates expansion of consciousness, then you find your life more intact and more able to network and deal and, you know, kind of ride the waves of change, and you do it more effectively because you have that center. But it all comes down to that life of service. Have you found your passion? Because if you find that passion, then what the stimuli that's coming at you says to you no longer affects your day-to-day living, and you're able to reconnect. Because one of the biggest things we're losing right now is the ability to have community. Everybody has become so isolatory that it's great that we're expanding internally, but what are we doing for the greater good? Because the greater good right now is in crisis. And so where's that crisis coming from? And is it just going to be you, me, and a couple other people out there going, okay, well, let's try this? People are so afraid to fail in the public arena, not realizing this is now a collective consciousness. It is the work of you, of me, of JT, of JT Fox, for those of you who don't know, that's how we met. So and everybody is so masterful in their own area, in their own arena, that when they start coming together and building that community of leadership that we so need at this time, then people start to find their purpose again, and they start to re-engage with the world around them. Because let's face it, COVID was a big reset. Everybody had to face their skeleton. They had to face their shadows. People got divorced. People, like, they couldn't leave the house. I mean, it was like a nightmare for a lot of people. For you and me, though, if I'm going to be an educated person, we probably enjoyed it. I really loved it. I loved having time by myself. I had no excuses. I just had to deal with my shadow. And I looked at it and I was like, I went through what people call hell. But the journey towards your higher self is through the bowels of hell. You got to face your shadow. You got to face your fears. You got to face your insecurities. You got to face your inability to be in public. And, oh, I don't want to be seen, but I've still got this big calling. And COVID kind of, in a weird way, I'm not going to play light of it because a lot of people suffered, but it also helped a lot of us face our greatest fear, which is we could not outrun ourselves. We couldn't. And so a lot of people, I think now, with the guidance of leaders like you and the people I've mentioned and others out there, are going to start coming out of that, what I call the cocoon phase, where they were so disconnected, right? Every butterfly has to go, as a caterpillar, has to go through that metamorphosis. And so I think for a lot of us, what we're witnessing from a higher perspective is a lot of people still coming out of the cocoon, where they don't yet know what their passion is, or they have so many ideas that they can't materialize it into the world because it's so conflicted, right? Like, just imagine a lot of different ideas constantly swirling in your head, and you're not able to fine tooth it to what it is that actually makes you happy. And so when that happens, you start to experience the fact that you start to blossom. Like, if you look at the tree of life, you become the flower of life. And then your wisdom and everything that you've earned and learned, you put into the world, and that becomes the seed of life, because then it brings other opportunities to you. But none of us get there while we're still in the cocoon phase. But for you and me and everybody watching, it's important to give people that space to let them go inwards, because you've got to go in before you come out, right? And so though a lot of people may seem like they're disenfranchised or completely disconnected from reality, they're building their own reality first within their own home, so that that home is well lit for other people to then be able to see what they've done. But there are people who just completely just disappear from us. And that's a different path. If you believe in esoteric theosophy, there are two paths. You can take the path which is very angelic, which is all about where you disconnect from reality and you just want to get the hell out of Dodge. You want up, you want out. I don't want to be here no more. And there's the other path, which is more of the I'm not trying to trigger anybody, but the Jesus Christ path, which is more about service and being on the ground floor and kind of facing enemies and foes and evolving as you go. But there are two different paths. There's the Buddha, who's amazing, who gave up all of everything he ever wanted. In fact, if you ever want to really understand the Buddha, you should watch that movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Because at the end, Richard Dreyfuss leaves on the ship for the betterment of humanity, leaving his family behind, which is something really global, right? None of us could ever possibly imagine that at that time. But if you look at it from the perspective of what he was doing for humanity, is he sacrificed everything he had to go and do something greater. And so some people will go through that. And then there are other people who are more Jesus-like, which are going to be like on the ground floor doing what you and I do, which is talk publicly. Sometimes we get stones thrown at us. Sometimes things happen to us. But it's our centered focus that makes our reality change. And look at everything that you've accomplished by being more centered and actually focusing on your higher self, that soul that's literally directing you. And the cleaner you are, which you must be because you hear yourself clearly, the more that you're able to do that, the more change you create. And look what you've done. It's a perfect example of how it's important to reconnect when you're ready, to give space to those who have not gotten to that point yet, but also understand that there's about to be a lot of butterflies that are suddenly going to appear from the work that a couple of people like you, me, and the others, when we get pulled together, are going to do, and it will open something up for everybody as a whole. And so that's where they'll find their passion again. But it just takes a couple of us having these candid conversations to change the world. It really does. But you have to go through the process you were talking about, which is detaching. Oh my God, the world's falling apart. We're going to hell. Okay, well, how do you get out of hell? You got to walk. Keep walking. Just keep walking. You're going to find your exit. I did. You did. It's not the easiest path, but at the end of the day, your world really does change quickly. One of my biggest things that I really had a big drive when I started my mission like 3 years ago was I wanted my own home with my own peace and space and like really minimal stuff. And what it provided me was the truth of who I am. I'm super humble. I don't need a lot. And I realized that what is it, a wonderful saying? I think I heard it, I even wrote about it once. Maya Angelou once made a comment about, you may show up as one, but you represent 10,000. And what I realized is that when you and I engage our higher soul, we're connecting to something so much bigger than we are in consciousness. And so when we just step forward and find that passion again to try new things, like talk to you live, hi everybody, online or whatever, and let that go into the universe, then you show up for yourself. But it takes that process of finding that truth.
Yeah, that's good. And I was wondering a lot. First, during COVID, one of my big realizations was that I'm contagious. I didn't know this. COVID showed it to me. Actually, all of us are contagious, and if we are contagious in a bad way, we can be very contagious in a good, positive way. It means that we are all anyhow interconnected, so this is good. And the other thing that really brought me to the focus about reality is that actually we need to think about the direction. Are we escapers and we want just to go to another place and to always live for the better after? Or are we actually destined here in this reality just to shine, to flourish, and to express who we are, and to actually, through interconnectedness, to mutually create a better experience for all of us, because our mutual objective experience is based on each of our individual expressions, so to say.
Yeah, I'm going to say this about that whole thing. One of the greatest mentors you can have is spiritual literature, and I would recommend that everybody find that because it really helps your reality shift. But one of the things I really noticed is when you are talking about life, you want to be present in the moment because you are granted a gift in being at the school, and we're getting to learn all these things, and we're getting to be the people we're supposed to evolve into. And so when you're present daily and you live your life for now, your world opens up to you. Because if you're always worried about what's going to happen tomorrow or the 10 days down the road, then you're forgetting to be here now. And it goes back to what I said about the type A personality. They need to know where they're going, but are they enjoying the journey? If they're not, then they're not here. They're somewhere else. And so they're never taking the opportunity to really expand and to grow. And so one of the things I've noticed is there's a wonderful man that I just wrote about. His name is Dr. Abraham Karim. And he has this really great theory called biogeometry, which talks about what it is physically in our world to exist and resonate, because we live within a structure, and that structure has a resonance. And one of the things I recently posted was about, are we just particles or atoms acting and reacting to each other by command, right? The breath of life. And so that type of study and that type of field brings people into the now, because it allows them to not only be present, but for their organic brain to connect to a higher guidance and go, well, is that even possible? And when you start to do that, your day-to-day becomes where you want to be. You're learning something every day. And when you try that, suddenly you stop living in the future, because all you're trying to do is be of service today. And so I would say education is really important for that, as far as your own personal research and study, and also finding what really resonates with you on a spiritual level, and focusing your energy on how that influences your day-to-day living. Because when we're present every day, then we start to appreciate the people we interact with more and more every day, and our compassion grows, and we start to become more empathetic towards everyone else that we meet, and we start to realize that we're looking at God, Allah, the divine, whoever it is, looking back at you and another human's experience. And one of the things that I've learned to do in being present is remembering who I was as that person, or thinking about who I might be if I was at that evolutionary stage, right? We see people like Elon Musk up there, and he does these incredible things, and he's controversial, but we all are. We really are. And he does some incredibly amazing things. And sometimes he says so prolific of statements that if you're not present in the moment, you get caught with the glitziness to it. And you're just like, but you're missing the substance that the man possesses. You know, it's not, I'm not the only one who's looking at him going, this guy's like Tesla, dude. Like, it's just like Tesla, only like reincarnated. But that's a personal opinion. But what I'm saying is when you're present, you stop looking at the superfluous and you start to be there for the person. And like when I look into your eyes, I'm not looking just into Alex's eyes. I'm looking into God's eyes, looking back at me. And we're having a conversation where he's trying to work out a query. What happens when these two people come together? Or what happens when these two people come together? Is it going to be like a hair pulling, knockout, drag out fight? Are they going to rise above it? Are they going to meet at the middle of the table? I mean, so many people are just so disenfranchised with the now that they've completely checked out from their day-to-day living. They spend their entire life in Netflix. They leave their work, maybe they'll have sex with their partner, and then the rest of their life is spent on Netflix. They really don't want to go anywhere. They don't cook, you know, all of that stuff, because you've completely stepped out of the now. You're so like, I just want to fill time. I just want to fill time. I don't want to think. I don't want to do any other work. I don't want to sit there and evolve as a person. And so that really affects your reality because things start to fall away. Suddenly you find yourself isolated and your friends start to go away and all that stuff. And so when you're not present in the now, and you're not doing something that pulls your attention in, even if it's creative, artists are always present in the now. And have you ever noticed they have a higher frequency? Their vibration is so high that when you go into them, they're just like, wow, that's a lot of energy coming at you because they're always present. It's like studious men, when they read, they're meditating. That's a form of meditation. And then when you are drawing, that's a form of meditation. Watching Netflix, no offense to Netflix, I love you, but it's not meditative. In fact, that's escapism. It's one of the things that I find interesting about everybody going towards the simulated reality nonsense. I'm like, you're already in a simulated reality. So now you're going to double down on another simulated reality? And how are you going to get out of that shell? Because what you're doing is you're basically saying, this is where people become chronically addicted to it. What you're saying is, I'm so unhappy with my own life and with how things are that I'm not going to do the work. Instead, I'm going to go live someone else's life that's an animated creature that doesn't actually exist. And I'm going to spend all of my energy doing that. So I know this is a really broad answer to what you were saying, but I just think it helps people focus on what you were saying, which is to be present and to actually be of service in your day-to-day life. Because when you see God looking back at you, then that is not a situation that you downplay. You take that person seriously, and what you do is you acknowledge them. And when you give anyone the ability to be heard, even if it's in silent language or it's nothing spoken, and you're present, then that person feels that much better, and you raise their vibration in your life. And so that's one of the things that I really, really recommend to people is, I know that there's a lot going on, and I know that we truly are at a crossroads where it almost feels like half the population is going to go down, like almost de-evolve, you know, with the hypocrisy, the greed, and all the other stuff. And then the other half of us are working on consciousness and evolution and bringing the species upwards. So everyone at some point now is going to have to face the reality. You need to choose. Are you going to do the work that's required of you to evolve and to live as a conscious being and do what you've done, Alex, or to do even what JT does? JT's an incredible businessman, but they show up every day for their lives. These are masters of their environment. So are you going to be that person? Are you going to be the person that you dream about being by actually doing the actions now that are needed to get there? Don't worry about how it happens. Just worry about doing the steps, like every little step, like baby steps. And the more that you do that in your day-to-day living, the more your reality will obviously shift. Because at some point, like you can attest, Alex, there comes a moment where we don't do anything. Something happens, an opportunity presents itself in our lives, and that opportunity just blew our lives up in a completely different way that we didn't know that was coming. But it wouldn't have come to us if we wouldn't have been present and connected to that soul, that conscious living. That would never have been presented to you because you would have just like thrown it away. So that's something that we really, as a collective, should be working on together. And now that men and you, like you, me, and women like Oprah and all of these other incredible spiritual leaders are now stepping forward, talking about unity and about the collective consciousness, our reality will begin to shift because it will be through our vessels, our personalities, where people connect to something that we say that they never thought about, and their light bulb goes off. And suddenly they want to learn more about whatever it is that you and I are discussing. And it not only builds your business, my business, or whatever. I mean, I'm a writer, it's not really a business, but what it builds is it builds interest, and that interest then propels action, and that action then changes reality. And then that reality changes the way the collective operates. And so it's kind of a step-by-step process, but begin it by doing exactly what you're saying is be here now. Don't worry about the afterlife because you're not going to be consciously aware of it like you are here, right? This is a self-aware vessel where we're in an academy and we're here to learn something. And we all better figure it out, right? But when you remove the stress of it, you start focusing on the end result, what the grades will be, and you start living in the now where you start to get better grades, right? Because our life changed the moment we stopped blaming other people or stopped making excuses. And now I'm pretty sure you and I and the others spend a lot of our time working on our field. And it's not work anymore. It's enjoyable. There's a passion in you and I and what it is that we do. And when you find that passion, your world opens up and everything shifts for not just you, but your family. And how does that work? It's like a ripple. Your family changes or your friends change because then they start to see you differently and your vibration changes and their vibration changes. And then what happens to their friends? Their vibration starts to change and people start making adjustments in order to accommodate their growth. And something that you are actively really, really a great propeller for is conscious living. And that type of intention, it all comes down to intention, is where we can change the world.
So do you think that we, the human beings, are going to become more synchronized and more harmonized with each other when we go into this direction that you're saying?
I think so. I think there's a universality that's making itself known, right? Because back in the day, we heard of the collective unconscious, but now the fact that we're so aware of it going into a conscious state where we as a species are very aware of our community, because we haven't had it for so long. COVID kind of stripped us of community. And so we were left very isolatory. So now as we start to branch out, but we're building different communities, aren't we? So what's happening is we're harmonizing our frequencies to different sectors of the same collective. And it's almost like becoming part of a department. Some people are very Catholic. Some people are very spiritual. Some people are esoteric. Some people are very creative. Some people are actors. Some people, but they're starting to pull towards each other and they're changing the frequency. And what that does is it then changes the vibration for all of us because it creates a different orchestral reality. And so I think we are moving towards a more universal construct where instead of being dogmatic and separative, we're becoming more unicative. And we're trying to find a vibration that best resonates with whatever the boss is, right? Whatever name you give it, whatever we belong to, whether it's an academy, whether it's an ovary in space, like it could be a cell for all we know, whatever the reality is actually made of, that conscious being is kind of pulling us towards each other. And so I think, yeah, we're going to start resonating with each other a lot more because we're going to start focusing on what you and I are doing right now, which is where we come together and not where we go apart. And I think that will naturally, organically change the polarity of things because as people start to realize that both sides of the same coin are arguing the same topic, at some point, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. And you're just like, wait a minute, we're arguing the same topic. So where do we meet in the middle? And so a lot of us are now moving towards the middle, trying to find that middle path in the center. And so, yes, I think that we're going to become way more unicative. We're going to find a common vision. There's a lot of topics that all of us are already on board with, you know, like equality for all, protection of children. Like there's a lot of the crimes that happen to children in our world that should not be happening. So there's going to be a group of us to pull together and start to focus our collective's energy towards a common vision, and that will harmonize the melodies. But it's going to take leadership like this, yeah.
Yeah, because for me personally, it's a big paradox yet, because I know that when we speak about paradoxes, it's a lot about the duality and the extremes. But actually, if we go more and more into synchronization of societies and environment, then what is going to happen with the individualizations of the personalities, because we are going to become much more like, and are we going to stop seeing the differences?
We're talking about the environment, right?
Yeah, in all directions.
Okay, well, the thing to remember about the environment is that everything that we experience in the environment is us. So one of the things that we're going to find as we move forward is that everything that we're doing to the environment, we're doing to ourselves. This species can't exist without the environment. This planet is our mother, if you will. And whatever damage we're doing to it, it's at the cost of ourselves. So at some point we will do an end run, which is we will kill ourselves. It's just an inevitable thing. Or we can collectively start focusing on prioritizing our balance with the environment, right? You know, there's still things that I see every day that I just look at and I'm just kind of like, well, we can do a little better with that. Like, do we still need in America here, we have the pamphlets to go out with all the coupons. Do we really still need that to go in the mail, destroying trees? Do we really need that? Especially because we seem like we're going away from even currency and cash and money, like we're going towards token, whatever it is. So those type of things are going to become more increasingly of interest to us as a global focus, because we are so aware that we seem to be running out of time. The global warming thing isn't just a hypothesis, it's actually happening. We're in a microwave and we're still not taking care of that. And by ignoring it, some people are using their ignoring of it to piss you off so that you don't do anything. But we're moving away from that. We're not lost in the narrative anymore. And I think that's really important for how we're going to do well with the environment, is to stop buying into the narrative.
And do you think that there are going to be actually high conscious leaders, or actually it is more going to be integration on the middle levels where people are just organizing with themselves, and actually the leaders are going to follow this process?
I think that honestly, there are already, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think that there are already high conscious leaders. I mean, I'm going to put a couple names. Oprah Winfrey is a high conscious leader. She may not be in the political arena, but she has a major influence over our planet, and she rightfully does so. She believes in what we believe in, a universality, right? And so you hear it in her speech. Tyler Perry, another person. These are all influential people. But what we need to learn is, instead of looking at the false idols, the ones who hold a particular title, we need to see that a lot of the people that are going to be doing the work in the future are still on the rise. And so when these people all are aligned and when certain things all begin to click, then everything blossoms open, right? But conscious leadership is already happening. Even like Richard Branson is an incredibly conscious leader, and he's in a specific industry. JT Fox has an incredibly good conscious, and he does some really great work outside of what we see. There are leaders out there who do that, but right now it's an undertone, right? A lot of very powerful people do a lot of charitable work and work for the environment, all that stuff privately, because you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. The narrative has a way of vilifying people who are doing good things. There's a gentleman who just gave away his charity, the entire organization, to charity, because his kids are like, no, we don't need it. Let's leave a legacy that's better than what we ever had. And what does the narrative do? Oh, I would have done this. I would have done that. Blah, blah. Like, it was their freaking money. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, okay, you're going to trigger me right now. Like, that's not cool. But we are creating what's called interest. And when people have interest, other people start to gravitate towards that light. And the leaders that are already conscious leaders are watching and monitoring. And so are the people who are against evolution and against us from coming together. And so what we're going to find is that you're going to find an organic appeal between your audience and then audiences of Richard Branson or all of the different people that I've mentioned. They're going to start identifying one another. And when they get that line of sight, then they start to work together. And so what happens to those demographics? They start to come into each other's sphere because of their vibrational pull. And suddenly you have an entire planet actually on board with something where the minority of people are no longer in power. But it happens organically, right? It's not something that we can try as hard as we can, but until divine timing hits, you're basically going to hit the wall over and over and over again. But there are a lot of conscious leaders, but they haven't decided to become leaders in the way that we're accustomed to, right? They lead from their arena. They lead from the internet. Remember, a lot of us now understand that when the boss said that you will find the information you need in the cloud, he was talking about the internet. So a lot of very powerful people exist on the internet, and it is up to the people to find them. But with wonderful things like this broadcast that you're doing and this conversation that we're having, it builds interest not only from the people who know you, but the people who read my work, and then anyone that we're connected to. Because what it shows is that people are starting to move in this direction. So you are a conscious leader. I am a conscious leader. It's just that we're not in a position yet where we, you wouldn't necessarily identify as leaders, because it's the subtlety of how we got there that's going to be what connects us to other people. It is the experiences that you and I share that brings us together, but it's in what we overcame that makes us the leaders we become. right? And so a lot of people are at that last stage. I just did a piece on this as well, about how there's a lot of wonderful people like you and I or other people that are kind of in the background to some degree. You're more upfront than I am, but this is my first time out in like public like this. But what happens is that there's going to come a moment in all of our lives where it just blends. And something that we or you or me or one of the others say to each other in a public arena really sparks a global interest. And it sometimes can be something so, it could be like a drawing that a child makes that somehow holds so much symbolism that it brings all of our higher consciousness into the shared imagery. Why does this child see all of the things that I see when I close my eye? You know what I mean? It can be something subtle like that. But we are talking about higher consciousness. And it's kind of like what Job experienced, if you look back at the Bible, where he questioned God. Why would you forsake me after having given me everything? And God basically looks at him and goes, hey, I don't have to explain anything. But just so you know, there's a lot of moving parts to everything that you see and experience. So just know that everything that happened had to happen. And at the end, Job is just kind of sitting there like, oh, okay. And what are you going to say? So we don't understand all the moving parts. But we do know from experience, from Bible, from literature, from sacred text, everything, that we're all moving towards that vision. But the conscious leaders may not be just well known yet, but they're there. And then remember, the conscious leaders that exist aren't in political power. Why would you be, a lot of conscious leaders, why would you go into a situation where you might have to lie a lot? I mean, like, we have to change the way we perceive leadership, because you can be a leader and be a silent leader, or you can be a leader that actually puts things out into the universe. Because sometimes I remember one of the best examples of leadership, true leadership, is a mother. And a mother is very unthanked. There's nothing she extraordinarily does other than love her children, but she creates the environment from which their children grow from. That tree grows from the mother. She's a leader. She's the leader, right? And so we have to redefine what we consider leadership. Because sometimes the best leaders are going to be people that you are looking at that you don't see because you're so busy looking at how they present themselves. I am one of those people, I walk in jeans and a t-shirt, and people are always, they're like, well, I thought you'd be in a suit. And I'm like, I have long hair. What would I be doing in a suit? And I kind of make a joke about it. But you're a leader. I'm a leader. Richard Branson is a leader. Oprah Winfrey is a leader. And they are conscious leaders. But they're not in the arena where we're expecting to see them. Now, will that stay the same? Probably not. The more that our collective starts to focus their energy on being not a scapegoaty with the environment and being like, no, we're going to take care of it. I don't care what you say, oil. Bye. Like, you're going to start moving things out of the way as things get harsher and harsher. It's kind of like the kid that goes up to the electrical socket, your child that you love, and you're like, don't put your finger in the electrical socket. And at some point, you just let the kid put it in there, and then they get shocked and they never do it again. So at some point, we're going to get to that crossroads where the collective just goes, okay, we really just need a whole new leadership here. And that's when you're going to see the emergence of an all conscious leadership. But so it's kind of happening slowly. So just, be on the lookout for those people that really ignite your passion or make you laugh or make you joyous or make you hopeful that there's a future, and then understand that that is a leader you should be aware of.
Yeah. So it's interesting the way you have such a passionate approach towards reality and towards everything that is happening. And are you personally involved into some business or some activity, or it's mainly the writing that through which you are trying to be a thought leader and influencer? You're doing it through writing or blogging, or how are you expressing yourself?
I express myself honestly. I have a column, I call it, it's like a little blog I have on LinkedIn where I get between 3,000 to 5,000 views every couple of days. And I've used that particular vessel because of the fact that it deals with the intelligentsia, the change makers of our world. And they're the unsung heroes a lot of times. And sometimes they're middle management to upper management. And so what I'm doing is I'm just asking questions that incite interest on their own behalf. I don't have to be involved from that point on. I just open the door, and then it's up to the person if they're going to go into the door. I just did an entire piece, like sometimes I do really funny things. Like I do how subliminal the narrative is in corrupting the way that we operate, where we keep saying in rap songs, I'm sick, I'm sick, I'm sick, I'm sick. And it means one thing in slang, but to the higher consciousness, all you're hearing is I'm sick, you know what I mean? So I write things that make you pause and ask you a question. Do you want to know more on this topic? Because if you do, then here's a great opening. Here's a key. I give you writers, I give you theories, I give you innovative leaders. I do entire pieces on conscious leaders. I do things where I actually post. We're all very conscious leaders, very top name people. I'll post it with their name on it, that hopefully they see it. Because what we're doing is we're inviting everyone to the table. And that's what I do through my writing, is I want everyone to feel invited and to be heard. Just because you are not literally at the table doesn't mean that the person that's appointed to represent you, remember, we stand for 10,000 or more people. That doesn't mean we're not the delegate that has been chosen to stand there. And so the other people can then feel heard through those vessels. And so through my writing, I feel like I give a lot of audience or a lot of people an auditory outlet where they do feel heard, because they're realizing, I mean, can you imagine? I started with nothing. Can you imagine? One person who reads that might see that there's 3,000 people who regularly read it. Oh, well, that I don't feel so alone. And that's really important for us in our collective vision. And so that's where that comes from. So with me specifically, I've chosen to do it as of right now, more on the writing, because the written word is incredibly powerful. It entices so much imagination from the audience that it allows a person to put their evolutionary stance into where they read it. So let's say that someone is not on the same page, maybe they're very dogmatic, but something that happens or they read in that specific piece may entice them to think about something differently. And if we can do that, then that is the consciousness that we are trying to go for. Sorry about that. I got a phone call in the middle of that.
Yeah. Okay, we're coming to the hour. So if you want, we can finish here. It is a good talking to you this week. And actually, I'm doing this every Friday night in my time. No, it's not night your time. It's 21 o'clock UK time. So we are speaking on different topics. You can follow it. And all the people that are enjoying this live stream can connect with us, both you and me on LinkedIn, and we can share this message for this collective raising of consciousness. And of course, there are a lot of threats also and a lot of probabilities for everything going wrong directions, but there are also a lot of possibilities for good and beautiful things to happen. And maybe there is also a possibility for both beautiful and bad things to happen simultaneously, as you expressed it during COVID. Some people felt that it is a bad thing, some people felt it's a good thing. So sometimes simultaneously multiple realities can be in the same time experienced through different parts of the population.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say that one of the things that I would say as we close is where we put our attention is what we invest our future in. So if we're focused constantly on where it's all going bad, then we're only going to ever register the bad things. And that's all we're ever going to experience, because we purchased that movie ticket. That's what we're trying to do. Yeah. But if you focus on all the positive things and all of the people who are doing the work that we want to see, then you start to see the world in a much better light. And you see there's a lot more hope than there is any sort of a bad thing. Yeah. So remember, you keep hope alive by focusing your energy on what's up moving.
Yeah. As we are saying, in reality, we have only two currencies: to pay with attention and to spend the time. As you said, we spend more and more of our time in the now instead of trying to go in the future or the past, and to pay the attention of what is making us connected and to be aligned and to be in higher vibrations, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, that's really important. That higher vibration is where it's at. You know that. I mean, you're the man for that.
Well, I have a little bit different idea. I think personally that all the vibrations are okay. Even sometimes the low vibrations are necessary and they are there for a reason, but it is good to be able to be and to experience all the different types of vibrations from the different parts of your experience or the day or in different scenarios. So it's not always necessary to be very high. This is my personal of course, experience, and I prefer.
Well, yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it's not, it's like when people try to chase mastery, you can't get mastery by chasing it. So yeah, absolutely. Enjoy the vibration that you're at because it's going to keep evolving. But at some point you're going to find a centered vibration and it's not going to shift. But don't pursue it because it's like chasing the rainbow. When you see the rainbow, but you get to the, you're never going to be at the point. What if you are already where you were supposed to be? So yes, I agree with you 100%.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the live stream now.
Okay.
Yes, and just see how to stop the recording. Okay, stop the recording.